Welcome to our new series of Ardenwood Presents on legacy planning. We've titled it The Timeless Impact of Planned Blessings because good estate planning is intentional, intelligent, loving, and effective. I'm John Mitchell, and I serve as Executive Director and CEO of Ardenwood here in San Francisco, where it's cool and foggy, our typical July weather. Thank you for joining us today. Let me just say that you are invaluable to Ardenwood. As you know, Ardenwood is a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization. Your donations have helped sustain our uninterrupted services since 1930. In return, our goal is to provide you with the best possible care, as well as informative and inspiring events like this one. You bring out the best in us, and we thank you. This series is something I've wanted to put on for a number of years now, and finally, all the details have come together. You know, Christian Scientists are wise. They make responsible, informed, personal decisions. They pray for guidance, and they develop a plan with confidence and joy. We've all experienced unexpected circumstances in our lives, ones that encourage us to be better prepared and that force us to grow. We hope that today's webinar and those that follow each month through December, along with Q&A opportunities, will inspire many of your questions. Will answer many of your questions and inspire more. Finally, the content shared today is only informational and is not intended to be legal advice. A replay of this presentation will be available on our website by tomorrow morning. And now, let me reintroduce our friend Jim Maher. Jim is a certified senior advisor and a broker consultant specializing in Medicare. He has been helping individuals and companies navigate Medicare since 1989. Jim is also a certified long-term care insurance strategist. Jim and his wife of 35 years, Teddy, live in Lincoln, California, just north of Sacramento, with their spoiled rat terriers. Jim has talked to more than 1,000 Christian Scientists since we first began these webinars last October, over 1,000, answering innumerable questions about Medicare, long-term care insurance, and estate planning. He's been a tremendous blessing to our field. And from what he's told me, he has loved meeting and working with all of you. Mm-hmm. Before we begin, let me explain how you can ask questions today. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see an icon that says Q&A. Simply click on it, and a screen will appear where you can type in a question. Press submit, and it will arrive here. We'll collect them, and we'll save them for the end of today's presentation. We are the only ones that see your questions. Please join me now in welcoming Jim Maher. Jim?
Thanks, John. That was a really nice introduction. Hi, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure dealing with all you Christian Scientists throughout the United States. I mean, I've talked to people from Maine to Alaska to Florida to California, all over, and I absolutely love dealing with you. You're the kindest, greatest people I've ever dealt with in 33 years, honestly. And it's my passion to help you all with Medicare, understanding Medicare, all the nuances of that, and even long-term care planning. So my goal is always to help mitigate healthcare expenses and retirement, just to make sure that you're on the right track. And most Christian Scientists are. But as Christian Scientists, sometimes regular insurance products don't quite fit what we need or you need as a Christian Scientist. And I found that out with long-term care. And I'm still working on it. And sometimes I had to start thinking outside the box. There's different insurance products that work really well for non-Christian Scientists, and they don't work so well for scientists. So after strategizing, I talked to Rick Bailey, who I'm going to introduce to you in a minute here, who is a certified financial planner. Rick's a former estate planning attorney. He's a life insurance expert. And we needed his help in putting something together to help Christian Scientists. And Rick's instrumental with his relationships with insurance companies and helping us find a couple other products that I think will work very well. And we're going to talk about those both in August and September. So today, the whole focus is just going to be on Rick and the overview. So again, after bringing Rick in, and I introduced him to John, and we thought, I think it would be really beneficial for Rick to cover all these tax advantage strategies to help both Christian Scientists, their families, and charities like Ardenwood or the Mother Church. So again, Rick is going to do a general overview of our 6-part monthly webinars regarding how to plan and provide more for your family and your favorite charities. So that's enough from me today. So now I want to turn it over to Rick Bailey. And all Rick's information will also be on the website so that you can check Rick's Camus Consulting, the name of his company, and find out a little bit more about Rick. But you're going to enjoy him. I've dealt with him for years, numerous clients. They absolutely love dealing with him. So all yours, Rick.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everybody getting on, and John and Jim for having me here. Let's see, takes me just a second to get everything up and running the right way. But as we go through today is going to be an overview. And when we're looking at the overview, we want to make sure that everything is appropriate for you. And so all of our planning, whatever we're doing is always focused on you and your goals. But the key is planning. You know, if we wait and something happens, it's shame on us in some respects, because we could have done a lot more. And, you know, as we talk about legacy planning, there's so much more to legacy planning than just what people think about for estate planning. So we're going to talk about that in detail. But it's nice that we're breaking this up into a 6-part series so that you don't have to digest everything at one time. So today is really going to be an overview of what's going to happen over the 6 months. But as you start thinking about your planning, one of the big concerns that we have to deal with is taxes. And we know taxes are always changing, and really taxes can affect so much of our legacy that we're going to pass on. And so if we can minimize taxes in the planning, we want to do that, because that's going to go in more to where you want it to go, whether it's your heirs, charity, or however you decide that should be best suited for you. As you plan for the future, I think we all look at our future, and when we look forward, we're always healthy and happy and doing the things we want. But we know that health will affect how our retirement years are spent. And so we want to make sure that we plan ahead, that we do those things that we can do and that we have control over, so that if a health issue comes up, we're ready to deal with that in a way that makes sense for us and our family. As you think about your plan, we plan for today. We give our best guess of what we think the future is going to be, but we want a plan that is going to be flexible, that is going to be able to grow maybe as your goals change, as you see how your heirs change. Whatever it is, we want to plan and have the flexibility to keep planning into the future. One thing that I really come across is you don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of my effort as a planner is to bring you ideas, and then for us to decide, do those planning ideas fit for you? And it's never a one size fits all, and it's never a cookie cutter plan. It's always based off of what you want to have happen. Finally, I look at the final pieces of a lot of planning, and that's really the charitable planning. As we're creating that legacy, can we give more to charity? Can we give more to our family? And really what I look at is, can we give less to Uncle Sam and use some of that tax money to really benefit you and the heirs and charities that you want to benefit? So as we go through this next 6 months, that's the goal, is to really create an opportunity for you to do planning that fits you and what you want to have occur in your life. As we look at this overview, I want you to keep a few things in mind. Number one, does this apply to me? And everybody has different backgrounds, different circumstances, net worths are different, income amounts are different. whatever that is, we want to help you create the best plan that you can have for you. And so, yes, it will apply to you. And, we bring out the strategies that make the most sense for you and really get that in place. I always get these two questions and I'll put them up together. One, is it too late to implement this plan? And the exact opposite, do I have to wait to start? And really, if, we can plan on and plan and plan, but if we don't implement those strategies, implement your plan, then it was kind of a nice exercise and sometimes a waste of paper, but until we implement it, it didn't happen. So the best thing is you can start now and you can go through the whole 6 months and see what pieces of this make sense to you. But if it really is resonating to you, we can get started immediately so that you have the plan that you want. As we look at all of this planning, we're really putting a puzzle together. And those puzzle pieces are your goals, your situation, your heirs. As we start bringing all those puzzle pieces together, we're really trying to get these pieces to fit the best we can for you. And it really is, I enjoy this because to me, it really is, I'm trying to help people create, the best plan that they can for themselves. And so as I look at it, it really is this is the fun part for me is, can I help you get the best plan put in place? So always remember, these are based off of you and your goals and where you want things to go in the future. Now, one of the things that we know is going to happen, we always have tax law changes, and tax law changes, used to be, I would say, more set in stone. That when I first started in my career, things didn't change as often. Now, as we get a new administration, a new Congress, things change. Right now, we're looking at some potential tax law changes that really will be the largest tax increase since at least 1983, and probably even more than that. And so if you look at it, the proposals are to increase the top marginal rate to almost 40%, increase capital gains to almost 40%, increase the Social Security tax maximums above 400,000, and eliminate 1031 exchanges for real estate. What does this mean from an income tax perspective? We really have to make sure that we have a plan that is going to address how do we minimize these taxes, because that's going to affect you in retirement. It's going to impact what you can pass on to your heirs, and really impacts what your plan can look like. So we will always, we can't let taxes drive the planning, but we have to make sure it's addressed. The other part of this is estate tax. And I was meeting with an individual that's now a client just a few weeks ago. And as we started into the estate tax, it really became more evident to me, he didn't even have an understanding or a baseline to really judge what the estate tax was. He's heard about it, but he's, with income tax, everybody knows April 15th, you've got to deal with your income tax each year. Estate tax affects our planning. It affects what we pass on. They're talking now about a potential decrease in the estate tax exemption from currently 11.7 million down to 3.5 million. So between a husband and wife, they can pass on, what would be 7 million, so twice the exemption, without paying an estate tax, and that estate tax is going up to 45% from 40%. Also, they're talking about eliminating a step up in basis. Right now, what that means is if you have a piece of real estate, let's say it's a commercial building, that if you sold it today, you would have a gain in that of $1 million. Well, you would pay capital gains tax up to 40% now, plus whatever the state tax is on that capital gains. Now, in the current estate tax laws, if you were to pass away today, what they do is they have a step up in basis that says whatever the fair market value is, that will be the new basis in the property. So if you passed it to your kids, they wouldn't pay any capital gains tax. They're talking about, with the new changes, that they're going to eliminate that step up in basis. So now that capital gains tax, your kids will have to pay it. And so That could be due if you were to pass away today, that capital gains tax would be due, paid by your kids by April 15th. And so we've got to plan because these tax laws are going to change and it can be detrimental. We're talking potentially losing 50% or more of your assets that go to Uncle Sam, not to your heirs. So we want to make sure we organize your planning in a way that takes advantage of as much tax planning as we can to get to the result that you want. When you start looking at organizing your estate plan, what I really want to look at is think about this as an umbrella over your plan, over all of your planning, all over your assets. This is the foundation of setting up what you have and where you want it to go. And so this is where a lot of people just in their planning stop because they think it's just about moving the assets. And that's a big part of estate planning is how do we move your assets from you to wherever you want it to go? But that's only a piece of it. As we look at your estate plan, number one is we want to avoid probate. Probate is an expense that if your estate is in a probate situation, that's an expense that you could have avoided. And if you're in a state like a California and New York, those probate expenses can be extremely high. And your money that could have gone to doing good for your heirs and charity or whoever you want that money to go to is now going to attorneys. And so we just want to create efficiency in your estate, make sure that what you have is going where you want it. This is a funny one here. I know a lot of people, when I say identify your heirs, they ask, half the people may look at this and say, well, I already know it's going to my kids or my grandkids. But what about friends, family, great-grandchildren? Who do you want your assets being distributed to? Not only how, but who? And that part really goes into what legacy do you want to have carry on beyond you? And I like the word legacy versus estate plan. Estate plan, a lot of people get caught up in, I don't have enough assets and my estate's not large enough to worry about. But when you start looking at the connotation of legacy, what do you want to be remembered for? I was just talking to an individual 2 weeks ago that she wants to pass a certain amount on to her kids and she wants the rest of it to go to charity. And as we talked about it, I said, well, what's driving this choice to give a lot more to charity? And she said, I want to encourage my kids and especially my grandkids to think beyond themselves. And so what we're doing is instead of waiting until she passes away to start that charitable giving, we're actually going to start it now. So not only the legacy is I'm giving to charity, but she's going to start teaching her grandchildren why and how to do that charitable giving today. So whatever that legacy is, we want that as part of your plan so that you're remembered into the future for the good that you can do and are doing. Finally, as this plan is developed, we want to protect your assets. And whether that's protecting it from Uncle Sam taking it in the form of taxes or protecting it from creditors that can take that away from you. There again, as you envision what your retirement is, how devastating would it be if you lost those assets to a lawsuit? And things can happen, and we want to make sure we plan. We want to protect your assets so that they're doing the things in retirement and in the future that you want to. Again, talking about long-term care, as I said, as we start picturing our retirement years, those golden years, whether you're picturing it with your kids and grandkids on a beach, on a golf course, whatever that future we envision, none of it do we ever envision ourselves being in a care facility. We don't envision being in bed being taken care of. That's just not part of what that's not how we think. We always have that positive outlook. And so as we start looking at it, we know things happen. So as you start looking at long-term care, Long-term care really looks at, two different areas: chronic health issues. That's an issue that, develops slowly over time, worsens over time, and eventually you need help. Cognitive issues, dementia, Alzheimer's. I've got an uncle going through that right now, that my aunt has been trying to take care of him 24/7. And instead of reaching out to others that can help, she's trying to take that burden on herself. And so what we want to do, we want to have a plan, and we want to make sure that plan takes care of us and helps those around us. A lot of times when I think of long-term care, really think of this: it's not about you. It's about the loved ones around you. How, because you're the one being taken care of, how can they help manage that care without upsetting their daily life, their health? I've watched my mother-in-law go through it, helping, her first husband and now her second husband. And it's one of those where it takes a toll on her, but it's taken a toll on the extended family as well. When you think about long-term care, what we look at is, there's 6 activities of daily living. Think about when you wake up in the morning, what are those things that you have to do to go throughout the day? And if you can't do 2 of those 6 activities of daily living, then you're considered as needing long-term care. Now, how are you going to allow those around you to take care of you? Are you going to set money aside? Or, as Jim, has talked to a lot of you before, and we'll talk about it in this series, how can we create, long-term care policies or alternatives to long-term care solutions that will allow those around you to better take care of you, to prepare for what honestly most of us are going to need at some point, as those people around us that we love can step in and really start, managing our care, continue to provide that support for us, but also get us that extra help when it's necessary. So we'll get into that more here in the next couple months so that you can see what's happening. As you look at creating your legacy, I really again like this word legacy, because you're thinking beyond just property. You're thinking about beyond just what is the use, but think about what is your legacy. What is it that you want to be remembered for? And so those values that are important to you, can we pass them along? And as we talk about this, we'll talk about, we can talk about perpetual values. And I'll work a lot in this estate planning, legacy planning arena, really pulling out for a lot of people, what are those values? So if you think about it, if I'm just going to, pass on, money to my kids, and I pass that money on to my kids with no strings attached, I have to rely on them making good decisions. Now, are they at the age where they're going to make good decisions? That's one thing. 2, it's going to come down to, as they're making those decisions, hopefully I've trained them to do it. Now, we always hear this of trust fund babies. And as I start looking at these trust fund babies, how did that happen? Well, a lot of times it's, here's a lot of money. And I'll bring this as an example. If you go back and look at how people react when they win the lottery, most people that win the lottery are bankrupt within a 2-year period. And why is that? Well, in comes all this monopoly money, and they didn't work to get it, other than buying a ticket of some kind. That's all they did. Now, do they know what to do with it? So think about your legacy. If you're going to pass on these assets to your children, grandchildren, or whoever your heirs are going to be, do you want to put stipulations on it? You might want to say, this is for education. If education's important to you, what about setting up an educational fund so that you can now say, I want you to go to college, if that's what's important, and I'll talk to people as they say education. Is education an Ivy League education, or does it include truck driving school? And you've got to decide and make sure that it's your values that you're passing on, and that you're influencing the way they can act. The other thing is you may want to discourage how people act. And if it's one where, I'll use the extreme, if we have grandchildren that or children that have a history of drug abuse, handing them money may not be the best thing that can happen for them. And so as you think about your legacy, how do you want your money spent? I worked with some clients years ago where it was an interesting situation. They had two kids, a son and a daughter. And as they planned for this, their daughter was going to control all of the money in trust for her brother. And my natural reaction was, that brother must have some kind of an issue. And as I talked to the parents, I understood that he was a really good kid. He was, in fact, a great kid, and I got to know him over the years. It was interesting was he didn't understand money. Money to him meant nothing. In fact, they gave him money to go pay his college tuition. And on his way to the college, to pay his tuition, he ran into a friend that he thought needed the money, so he handed him the money. But he still went to the college to pay his tuition. He just didn't have any cash when he got there. It just didn't matter to him. He was always looking, who can I help, who might need it, and didn't think about himself. So we had to put somebody in there to help that legacy continue, or their son would have probably ended up on the street homeless just because it didn't matter to him. So think about how you want it with your legacy, and your legacy may be a charitable legacy. As we talked about, building this plan, we want to make sure as we're building this plan that we also build it in a way that protects your assets. Creditors, if you think about it, those creditors can be people we know, can be you get into a car accident and now you get sued. What happens to your assets if all of that, those assets are gone? What happens to that plan that you've developed? And so we want to make sure that that plan is built around protecting what you have so that you can pass that legacy on. Finally, with charitable giving. Charitable giving is a great strategy. For those of us that have charitable inclinations, then a lot of us give to charities throughout our life. But it's also one, as we start looking into the plan, the Internal Revenue Code, or Congress, has encouraged through the tax code, we're encouraged to give to charities because we can create tax deductions that allow us to write that off against our income tax, and sometimes we can use it to offset estate taxes. But it really is a way that we can create a win-win strategy in how we're planning for our heirs and the legacy that we're passing on to them, and also to charity. And so we'll get into a lot of that planning that can be done, but it's one where with charitable planning, you can actually sell assets now, create a sizable income tax deduction to offset the tax of selling that asset. You can create more income back to you if that's what we want, or we can create income to your family if that's what you want, and then pass on a large endowment-sized donation to the charity. So if you start looking at it, what Congress created is the opportunity to create more to us, more to our family, more to charity, and you start looking at where does that money come from? It comes from the tax savings. And so it's the tax savings are so good, and I'll deal with a lot of charitable giving with people that honestly have no charitable bone in their body. It's one where when I bring up charitable planning, they'll remind me that they're not charitable. And then as I go through the plan, I'll show them here's why we're doing it is, for tax planning purposes. And it's interesting what happens after that. Most of the time, these people will say, well, yes, I was charitably inclined. I love to give to charity. I didn't think we could do both. I didn't think I could take care of my kids, my grandkids, and whoever their heirs are, and give to charity. They thought it was an either or, when in reality, it's a both. But it takes some planning, it takes some understanding. They're not overly complicated strategies, but they're great strategies for those that it fits. Finally, as we start looking at legacy, I like looking at multiple generations of planning. When I'm looking at multiple generations of planning, it really is one where I'm looking at, there again, what is your legacy? How far do you want your legacy to go? And there's states that we can set up trust in certain states that trust can last forever. So when you start thinking about those values that you want to pass on, do those values stop at your children? Do those values stop at your grandchildren? Can it go to your great grandchildren and on and on and on, as long as there's money in that trust? But here's why I like talking about this. There again, as we start looking at multiple generations of planning, when we look at charitable planning, we're looking at planning that goes beyond you. It goes beyond me. It goes as a way to influence good for generations to come. And so as we start looking at that as part of our planning, it really comes back to, why are we doing the planning? We're doing the planning there, it really is, we're looking at, what planning are we doing for today? And if you look at a lot of the planning that we're doing for today, we're looking at you for your retirement planning, for your long-term care planning. How are we taking care of you? How are we taking care of you into the future for retirement? Then we start looking at, it's okay, if we're looking beyond you now, if we, and think about this, put assets into 3 boxes or 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 is, this is assets I need for today. The next bucket is, these are assets or income that I need for the future. And that big bucket is retirement and long-term care. Now, anything else that you have not identified for today, or you've identified it's not for the future, okay, then it's going to somebody else. That's somebody else's heirs, that's somebody else's charity, but it's somebody other than you. And as we start focusing on that 3rd bucket, we start looking at, how do we want that to go? And so there again, back to the legacy planning, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want to encourage? And so as we start bringing those kind of scenarios to the front, we really start creating a legacy that goes beyond us. And really now, as we start bringing that estate planning into a legacy planning situation, it really creates a nice opportunity for us to think beyond. So now, as you start looking at this, it really comes back to, as we focus on the planning, it's making sure that we understand what the opportunities are, where we can influence. And there again, it's always going to come back to you based on your goals, based off of your current situation, and how can we best take what you have now, meet those goals, and take it into the future. So I'll turn it back over to John now for the question and answer time.
Thank you, Rick and Jim, for this overview on estate planning and the value of having a plan. So at the present time, we don't have any questions. If people want to submit them, we are able to take them now. If you have any questions, or we can wait until Thursday. The way we structured this is we wanted to do it in sequential manner, as you heard from the beginning, over 6 months. We have the program or the discussion on the topic on Tuesdays, and then we make the question and answer period available on Thursdays. So each month we have that opportunity. So at present, we don't have any questions. So I guess we've covered what we wanted to get covered in this intro, or if anyone would like to send in something now. Rick, that was really helpful in terms of getting people to think about, what do I want my or our legacy to be? Because as one planner that we've worked with in the past says, at least in California, and I'm sure in every state of the union, if you don't have a plan, in our case, California has a plan for you, and it won't benefit the things that you want. I mean, in terms of the charities, in terms of your family and that type of thing. That's just the way it works. So,
and it really, if you think about it, and I've dealt with this before. I've been in situations where I've had to go to the kids and tell them, mom and dad, didn't plan. So, I've had one situation, mom and dad divorced. Mom was no longer had any relationship to the kids, but dad, when he passed away, had never changed the beneficiaries to his life insurance, his retirement accounts. Everything went to mom. Nothing went to the kids. So now if you think about that, they don't have a relationship to mom. Now who are they upset with? They're upset with dad for absolutely, there again, you're not entitled to that money. It's what mom and dad would want, mom or dad, whoever. But the planning really comes down to making sure what you have goes where you want it to go. And it takes work. It really does take effort to put it through, put it together. But it's interesting as I work with a lot of clients, it's interesting how things change. It's one of those, if you start thinking about, I'm working with one client now. We've actually been working on the plan for about 6 months. And I thought back today from where we started to where we are today, it's not even close. But as they started putting their thoughts together, it's one where they, it doesn't just go to their children, it goes to their grandchildren. But this one they raised one of their grandchildren. And, I didn't know that until about, probably 2-3 months in. And now they're treating that grandchild not as a grandchild, but as a child, because that's how they raised that individual. And there's no right or wrong to the plan. I guess if I had to say what's wrong with the planning, is not doing it. Just taking that state plan, and I know what the state plan is. It's not what most people would do, but the other part of that is by not planning, you've left it up to the courts and the attorneys to figure out what happens. And they really get to charge whatever they want as they go through that. So a lot of that money gets wasted in the process.
Absolutely. And when we've talked about from the very beginning, we had a lot of these strategy sessions, as Jim and Rick recall, in terms of how devastating it can be not to plan, in terms of literally destroying relationships for the rest of our lives. And that's why I feel so strongly about it in my own family, to see an event that was totally avoidable destroy relationships in my family. So that's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about it. It's so unnecessary and unloving. And anyway, we're getting some good questions. So let's get into it. And we're going to go till about 5 p.m. So we've got a little over 20 minutes. And the first question is a very good question. And we failed to mention this. Is Rick willing to share his PowerPoint screens with us, or as they call it now, a slide deck? And he is. So that will be available on our website. Next question. Am I going right here? Okay, here we go. I'm just getting to know how this screen is working. What do you think about education funds for grandchildren versus just leaving them money in your will?
Here's probably the best way I've seen it. You leave them the money in the will, they get to go spend it with their friends however they want to. And if, it's one where I can give you the word, a situation. My cousin, my aunt and uncle passed away within a couple of weeks of each other. At the time, my cousin, who was an only child, got all of the money. They were successful farmers at the time. Mid-season, took the money and walked off the farm. After spending all that money, about a year later, they had about enough money to go back and start farming again. The money was gone. And this was people, some individuals, you'd look at them and think they're solid, they're going to make great decisions. I look at it as I like having that. If you think education is important to you, making sure that you know, set those funds aside for education, but make sure you understand what that means to you. I worked with an individual, this was going on probably 20 years ago. They had their first child. And the first child, they set aside, you know, money, life insurance, and everything. Our child's going to go get an Ivy League education. And that's what they wanted to put as their plan. A couple of years later, they had their second child. All of a sudden, they realized they didn't have enough money to fund 2 Ivy League educations. And so they had to go back and rethink, what did education mean to them? And where I can give you what I think, you know, worked for me in my planning. I looked at education as what will benefit my children and grandchildren. I want to encourage them to go to school, but I also looked at it and said, you know, there's, to me, is that, you know, 4-year college, is it postgraduate education? I opened it up and said, as long as they're going to post high school education and it's benefiting them, I don't care if it's a beauty school, a truck driving school, whatever it is, as long as that is furthering their ability to be employed, I'll pay for it out of my educational trust. So it really comes back to what you want, but I do like if you know, having educational funds set aside to provide those opportunities and make sure it goes to that.
Goes to the intended purpose. Yes.
Okay.
This one we can probably put somewhere rather than take the time, but we can list, it says, he or she says, please list the 6 activities of daily living. So can you rattle those off, Rick, or is that something we should post, or?
It's, go ahead, Jim.
So think about it when you get up in the morning, right? The 6 activities start with they call it transferring, when you get out of bed, right? And that's one of them. So normally you transfer, get out of bed, and most people use the bathroom. They go into the bathroom. So having control going to the bathroom would be another activity of daily living. Hopefully after that, they do some type of bathing, and then they come out and they dress, and then they go and they eat, right? So that's the 5th one. And then maintaining control of your bladder and bowels throughout the day. That's the 6th activity of daily living. So insurance companies measure that and say, if you can't do 2 of those, or if you need some type of standby assistance, then that's how we measure that you can actually trigger the benefits in a policy and start receiving the benefits. So they always say the 6 activities of daily living, or any type of cognitive impairment, like Rick talked about, dementia, any type of Alzheimer's, it can be ALS, anything like that, anything that can impact the mind will also trigger, if you have a policy, trigger those benefits, the activities of daily living. So hopefully that helped.
Thank you, Jim. Next up, does making a trust make a difference?
Yes, trust makes a difference. And when you look at avoiding probate, I like a trust over just a will. So what happens is, if you think about that trust, a lot of people confuse why a revocable living trust versus a will. With a will, we put in here, here's what we want to have happen when we pass away. And we put that into our safe, we put it in the desk drawer, whatever. You pass away, somebody goes and finds that, and that's when the activity starts. Now we have to go hire an attorney. We have to go to into court, probate court, with that will, have it validated. And now what we're going to do, the judge tells the executor of that will, now I'm giving you permission to go out and transfer the assets according to how the will says. During that time, the attorneys are controlling it, the court controls it. And if you're in a state like California, that probate probably lasts for 3 years. Okay. Now, if I have a trust, a revocable living trust, what I'm going to do is take all the provisions I had in the will, put it inside the trust, and say, here's what's going to happen when I either lose mental capacity or I pass away. Here's the next trustee that steps up in my place. Now, don't stop there. What we have to do is get all of those titled assets. So think your home, your bank accounts, your investment accounts, whatever those are, we want to actually go out and transfer those today into the trust. Once they're in the trust, now if something happens to me, my trustee only has to go to the bank, change the signature card at the bank, and they're in control of everything. That's an immediate process. I just had a client of mine in Southern California. His dad just passed away. The next day, he was in control of everything. We don't have to go to an attorney. We don't have to involve the courts. Everything happens. So a trust, I believe, is much better. But remember, if you don't transfer those assets into your trust, then you're back in probate. And now probate is going to control. What's probate going to do? Take those assets and move them into the trust and put you in the same point I would have had you anyway.
And Rick, doesn't probate include a public process where people can know what your activities are because it becomes a public record? Is that true? It
becomes a public record because the executor has to file an inventory of every asset, where it goes. So it's one where, I've seen this and you don't think it would happen. If you haven't been through this, somebody passes away. If you think, it's like my wife's stepdad just passed away. My mother-in-law has now been contacted by people looking to sell her things. If his assets were to go through probate, they would know exactly what she now has, and she becomes a target to whatever scam comes along. So yeah, your neighbors will know what you have. And if you're more private, you definitely want to trust. But even if that doesn't matter to you, I think just the efficiency of avoiding probate is the key.
Absolutely. Will you talk more specifically in future sessions about how to plan for multiple generations of heirs instead of just kids and grandkids?
Yes. Yeah, we'll get into more detail, but if you really think about this, it's one of those, if from an estate tax, so I'll give you two reasons why. Number one is there's an estate tax. Anytime, if I have my estate, I pass everything to just my kids. Then I have to worry about the estate tax, the exemptions, the tax cost, which is 40 to 45% right now. Then when my children pass away, they've got to do the exact same process, passing that to my grandchildren, and then the same process to great-grandchildren. So we're talking a tax that could be as high as 50% at each generation. If I come in and put that into a multi-generational trust, and I set it up right, and I set it up in the right state, and we can pick and choose which state we set those trusts up in. But if I set it up in the right state, now that trust has those assets, and from generation to generation, it no longer is subject to estate tax. So that's the tax reason to do it. From the legacy part of this, I like the fact that if it's important to me, and I'm setting this up for multiple generations, I can now influence my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids. As long as that trust is in place, every generation I can have influence over what's important to me, my values. So yeah, we'll hit that in more detail, but it's a great way to do planning.
Great. If we want to start planning or implementing a plan now, who should we contact? Rick or Bill, and how?
Call Rick. Start with me. So it's one of those, my email's up there. That's probably the best way to get me. And it's one of those where we can start that now. And the planning really starts with, there again, we'll go through with, conversations, with questionnaires, getting it all pulled together and start the plan from there.
Great. This is a pretty typical question. What is your fee for setting up a legacy plan, or is it based on the amount of my estate?
I'd love to charge based on the amount of the estate, but I don't. We look at it, and number one, it's making sure that we can work together, and then from there we'll set a fee. It's always a flat fee from my perspective, because I want to make sure whether, if we can meet one time and we get it right, that's dumb luck, and we probably should buy a lottery ticket. It's going to take, I don't care if it takes one conversation, 15 conversations. It really is making sure that we get it right. So the fee, the fees, we discuss that, but it's, when we're figuring out what's all involved.
Excellent. Is it necessary to have an estate plan in your specific state where you are living?
Yes and no. The yes is we want to make sure that we have an estate plan that covers where the assets are. So it's one, if you're in California, we want to make sure we have addressed California law. We don't have to have the trust domiciled there, but we have to make sure we've got it covered. So it's really, with a lot of clients, a lot of people today, they can have assets all over the country and sometimes across the world. We've got to make sure that we've addressed it in each jurisdiction where those assets are located. But it's one, if you live in California, you live in Oregon, Nevada, wherever it is, we just have to make sure we've addressed that.
Great. Rick, how would you work with someone who has a financial or investment advisor already?
We love the team. Everything that we do should be involved with a team. And so if you've got an investment advisor that you like, we want to make them part of the team, whether it's, the investment advisor, whether it's your CPA, whether it's an estate planning attorney. We bring together that team, whether you've got the team or whether we have to insert some people in. We want to work with the people that you trust working with. And so there's no conflict there. I'm a fan of the more eyes on it, the better.
And I guess the corollary to that is, can you work with individuals in any state of the union, any USA state?
Yes. Yeah, I do. From our standpoint, we do the planning, and then we bring in attorneys to do the drafting. And those attorneys have to have the ability to do it in those states. And we've got a network that we use. If you have somebody that you like, we involve them right in there.
Excellent. What about a living trust? Can you talk about that?
Okay, the living trust, or just like I talked about earlier, a revocable living trust, it all means the same. So the revocable living trust is the substitute for the will that helps avoid the probate. So whether they call it a revocable trust, a living trust, a revocable living trust, they all mean the same thing.
Excellent. Here's a good one. Would you say that communication with your family is highly important? They should know what you've got in mind, right?
Yes, especially if you're doing something that I would say is out of what would be the norm. So if you think about it, I've been involved with some of these where they've disinherited a child, or they've given the majority of their estate to one child instead of all of them. And so what I always look at, fair and equal do not equal the same thing. And so as you start looking at how you plan, a lot of the problems that I see that happen after mom and dad have passed away, it's because of lack of communication. Susie thought she was going to get mom's jewelry. Jimmy thought he was going to get something from dad. And all of a sudden it went somewhere else. Communication is the key. How you communicate depends on your family dynamics. It's like I've got a great relationship with my dad. He's still alive. But there's certain questions I know I can ask. There's certain questions I know are off limits. And it's one of those where anything that I would say is really important, I think I've got a good understanding. But they've made it clear, here's what we want to have happen. And the passing of mom and dad can either bring the family together or it can tear it apart. You know what your family dynamics are. A lot of times what I like to see from the estate plans that I help put together is write a letter. If you think about it, if I'm upset with mom and dad and it's after the funeral, and mom and dad aren't there to yell at, who am I going to yell at? Well, whoever's in charge. I good chance I'm going to take it out on somebody, which probably is one of my siblings. So take that opportunity to write a letter to your family, put it in there with your documents, and update that over the years as things change. As you know, here's what I'm thinking now. Here's why I did this. Here's why I set up an educational trust for the kids or grandkids or great grandkids. Here's why I gave the rings to, one versus the other. Whatever it is that would be the problem, address it in that letter. I had a friend of mine. I was brought in. Dad had passed away years before, so I was brought in and I was working with his mom. Here's what the problem was. Mom agreed everything should go equal to the kids, and all three kids got along. But all three of them helped Dad restore a classic car. All three of them wanted that classic car. That's what they remembered Dad from. That was the heirloom that meant everything to them, but it meant the same to all three of them because they were involved helping Dad do that. And I talked to Mom about that, and she tried to kick the can down the road. She said, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to say, let them figure it out after I've passed away. I guarantee in that situation, Mom, when she's gone, those three kids will fight and never talk to each other again. And they would have either had to sell the car because they can't agree, and so nobody got it. And so we finally came up with a solution. We said, you know what? Let's have an auction between the three kids, and they get to, basically bet, auction, bid their inheritance against that car. What did it mean to them? But now we brought all three of the kids in and explained to them, here's the situation, here's how we're going to resolve it. Unless you can come up with a better solution, this is what's going to be. And they said, that's fair. And so you start looking at it, and you've got to communicate to make sure, let's take those issues off the table and address them now before the kids never talk to each other again.
Amen. Boy, I've lived it. And I see it so many times in my work. I remember when our daughter was young and she was learning how to count, she'd say, we'd say 10 times, 20 times. Then she'd say, times infinity, Daddy. And it's communication times infinity to not destroy families. And like you just said, Rick, that was a beautiful response. My goodness, if anyone's experienced it, they know that communication is critical in these situations. Got a few more minutes here. Good questions. We'll have good questions for Thursday. Typically, insurance companies will need a doctor to certify that a person is having with trouble with two or more of the 6 ADL or activities of daily living, right, Jim?
Yes.
Or Rick?
That's correct, right. Licensed healthcare professional is the verbiage they use. Whether it's a MD, it can be a psychiatrist, a social worker. That's why it's so important that we find the right product for Christian Scientists. So.
Exactly, because a Christian Science practitioner or Christian Science nurse cannot do that. So right. it must be, yes, considered a medical professional. But a multiple generation trust will need a trustee to fill taxes forever, right?
Yes, it's usually one, and we always have this conversation. Is it better to have an institutional trustee? Is it better to have a family trustee? And we've got to figure out how that trustee is decided at every generation. A lot of times, if we're only talking one generation, let's make it easy. It's mom and dad and the survivor of mom and dad. Then it goes to one of the kids and we're done. If it's a multi-generational trust, then we're talking, we have to have a way to pick a trustee at every generation. A lot of times, and I'll use this more as just a default, I'll usually say, let's have an institutional trustee. Think of them as the custodial trustee. And then we'll have a family member as the family trustee. if you think of, if to break this apart, the institutional or custodial trustee, they're there to make sure that the assets are taken care of, the money's invested the right way. And so it's more the financial side. The family trustee is to make sure the kids have shoes on their feet. And so it's the combination of the two of them that really can work together. And I've got a bias against institutional trustees other than in kind of this role. And we have the ability to fire them and we have the ability to replace them, but it's going to be based off of how you define it for your trust.
Excellent. Why don't we take two more questions, and then because with the 5 o'clock hour, we'll just go a little bit over, and then we'll be set up for Thursday. I can answer this one. I'd like my adult kids to see this. Will it be available on Ardenwood's website? Yes, it will. We're hoping to have it up by tomorrow at the latest, but stay tuned. But it will be on our website. Yes. Let's see. I guess make this the last question. Do you have a will and a trust?
Yes. Yes, the trust is the driving part here. The trust is what's going to be that fundamental part of your plan that says, here's what we have, here's where it goes, and here's who's in charge. I would say the will at this point is called, I'll just say it's the whoops. Whoops, we forgot something. We forgot to put an asset into the trust. And so this is where ongoing reviews really come into play. So you put your trust in place. Things are going to change over time. It's not we put the trust in place and you pass away tomorrow and hey, great, we did the planning at the right time. It's you put this in place now. Every year we review it and from two directions. One from a legal and tax standpoint. Has something changed from a legal or tax standpoint that it's going to affect your planning? Or has something changed in your planning that needs to be changed in the documents? So that takes care of that. But then the big one is if we put the assets into the trust today, and let's just make it easy. You sold your home. You sold your home and you bought another home. Is that new home in the trust? And we want to review all those assets every year to make sure that it's in there. Now, things happen, things may fall through the cracks. You forgot something. And I'll give you a good example. This was from a client probably 15 years ago. He was dying of cancer. We knew he had 6 months to live. He actually lived 18 months. During that 18 months, we reviewed his estate plan 3 different times. We went through all the assets, everything was done. The widow, his wife, went at the funeral, somebody walked up and said, I miss your husband. He was a great guy. I took that money that he loaned me and actually put that money in as an owner of my business. It was a gift. That wasn't even a loan. It was just he wanted to help a friend and gave him some money. He put that money into his business. Now, whoops, we've got an asset we didn't even know existed. So that will, all that will is, if we miss something, put it into the trust. So you would have both. We hope we never use the will.
Excellent. Excellent discussion today. Well, thank you, Rick and Jim, for this overview on estate planning and the value of having a plan. We look forward to seeing you again. And thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you this Thursday afternoon for more question and answers. Same time, same Zoom link. You'll receive an email reminder. And we hope to see you again next month to address one aspect of legacy planning, covering long-term care costs. And that's on Tuesday, August 17th. And the Q&A is then on the corresponding Thursday, August 19th. So thank you all, and goodbye for now.